Hello my fellow gamers, GamerDude back once again, and welcome to today's video. Today we are talking about Ghostbusters Remastered and why it bombed in comparison to the original. So, today we're going to be discussing my thoughts on why it was worse, why the developers just seem to have created something that's absolutely and completely unfinished and not ready for release, and why it was done in the first place, and of course we're just going to discuss general things about the gameplay and the game itself. But before we begin the video, I want to give my subscribers a huge and massive shout out. Thank you all so much for the continuous love and support of my content. You know, of course I can't do giveaways or anything like that, so I still just appreciate everyone who stops by and views the content. Of course, as well, if you head over to my community posts, I am taking requests. You can drop me a line on the community page as to what you want to see me play, as to what you want to see me do. And if it is within my power, I shall upload said request. And of course, with Christmas coming, I am going to be getting some new games, so we can play through them as well into the new year. So then, moving on and getting right down to business. Why was Ghostbusters Remastered worse than Ghostbusters The Video Game? Well, right off the bat, the first thing I can tell you is it was made by a different company. Now, Ghostbusters Remastered was made by Saber Interactive, whereas Ghostbusters The Video Game was made by Sony, Columbia Pictures and Atari. Now, Saber Interactive, they don't have a great track record when it comes to games. And, you know, their sub-company that did it was also Mad Dog. And Mad Dog was... well, I'd never heard of Mad Dog, to be honest, until Ghostbusters Remastered came out. So it's a bad case of, why would they take on such a hugely popular game only to ruin it? I mean, the game has had 2 patches since it released. And both patches have made it even worse. I mean, how can you make a game worse than it already was? I mean, well, unless you count WWE 2K20, but that's also a video for another day. I've got a video planned on why 2K ruined WWE, so we'll do that another day. Anyway, so when I first played through the remastered version, I found issues with the audio, the dialogue, and the cutscenes. Whenever the camera moved off the characters, you couldn't hear what they were saying unless the subtitles were on. And when you're in the general gameplay, you can't hear what the characters are saying unless you're standing right next to them. Whereas in the original game, the cutscenes were fine, the audio was fine. Whenever you stood next to a character in the game, it was fine. You could still hear what they were saying. And whenever you were walking around, you could hear the character speaking in general. Whereas in Ghostbusters Remastered, this isn't the case at all. It's just completely broken. You can barely hear what any of the main Ghostbusters characters are talking about. And it really puts a downer on the game, because you need to hear what they're saying. You need to know what's going on. If you've never played the game before, if you never played the PS3 version, if you can't hear what the characters are telling you to do, then you're not going to know what to do, because a lot of the time in this game, it really does force you to use your wits. You know, you've really got to find out what's going on your own. So moving on to general gameplay. The gameplay itself, it is round about the same as the PS3 version, and it's about what you'd expect from an Unreal Engine. Because the remastered version was made with Unreal Engine, which you can't fault. Unreal Engine's a good engine. However, there are several occasions in which the game glitches out like crazy. Certain times you can be firing the proton pack, and it will glitch like crazy. The proton pack won't even make a noise, or it won't fire at all. Or, as you can see in the scene that I'm in right now, well, nothing's happening. You know, you can see the proton stream, yes, but there's no physical sound from the proton stream. And it's one of those key details in the original game that made it so lovable, because it's like, It's even got the original Proton Pack stream. It's got the Proton noise. That is so amazing. I love it. And then, you know, when the remastered version comes along, you're like, well, what's that noise? I can't hear anything. It does have its issues. It does have its flaws. And I mean, it's got way more flaws than any other game has had at launch. And they haven't even bothered to release a patch. You know, the last patch they released was supposed to be for bug fixes. And it, like I said, it made it so much worse. Because on the level right at the end of the game, where you're in the graveyard, there's a particular point where you have to shoot a ton of coffins. And every time you do, the game blue screens! The game crashes! It's like, you're supposed to do this to get past. And it crashes! It just doesn't work! It stops working! The original game, however, had no issues with this. The original game was flawless in the gameplay. It was flawless in the levels. I mean, yeah, it had a couple of glitches, like sometimes you would fall through the map. Sometimes there was a rendering issue. But it was on PS3. That was expected. On PS4, when it's supposed to be remastered, you expect a generally better product. And this, aside from the graphics, it feels like I was playing a buggy, broken PS2 game. I mean, I wouldn't say it's unplayable because it's still enjoyable as a whole because it's the Ghostbusters. But there's certain points in it that makes it feel like it's unplayable, that makes you want to just put it down and say, right, I'm going to give this a rest. But you know, given that there's a new Ghostbusters movie coming out soon, I'm guessing that's why they re-released this as a remastered game. But it's ruined it. It's ruined the experience because the game is just so broken. There's so many glitches. There's so many bugs with the gameplay. Some of the levels are completely broken and unplayable because the game will just crash or freeze. Like, I was doing a live stream on it on Halloween, and the game completely froze in the middle of a cutscene, and I had to stop the live stream. And then, as soon as I stopped the live stream, it blue screened. It's like, why? I've had more blue screens with this particular game than I have ever had with any other game I have ever played. And it just goes to show that it's not even remastered. So, getting on to the serious side of things. The original Ghostbusters game was released back in 2009 on the 16th of June. And it was made by Terminal Reality, Red Fly Studios, Zen Studios, 3-Wave Software, in collaboration with Sony Interactive Entertainment, Columbia Pictures, and Atari. So it was made by some well-known companies. Whereas, as I mentioned, Ghostbusters Remastered, the original developers had nothing to do with it, and wanted nothing to do with it, and it was made by Saber Interactive and Mad Dog Games. I mean, the original game on the PS3 was even rated lower than what the remastered version's been rated. The original got a rating of PG. The remastered version got a rating of 12. Now, I'm not sure why, because it's exactly the same game, and they must have gone to the same sort of rating area to have it rated. I mean, I think throughout the entire game there's only one, possibly two swear words in it, and they're not even that bad. You know, kids wouldn't even pick up on it. But the fact that it didn't involve any of the original creators just goes to show that it's not actually a remaster. It is, in a sense, a new game, because a new publisher has made it. It's like, say, take the Uncharted games, for example. If Uncharted the Nathan Drake Collection was made by EA Games instead of Naughty Dog, it wouldn't be a remaster. It would be a new game because it's been made by somebody else. Does that make sense to you guys? Am I making any sense here? I mean, it sounds like I'm making sense, but I don't know. This is for you, so just let me know if I'm not making sense, and I will debunk my own theory there. But yeah, basically, the remastered version, it's got a long way to go before it can be considered a game. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still enjoy it. It's still a bunch of fun catching ghosts, still a bunch of fun running around the levels and reliving the nostalgia of Ghostbusters. And the fact that it has all of the original Ghostbusters cast members is fantastic. With Harold Ramis sadly passing away as well, it is a nice homage to his memory. You know, it's a nice honour to Harold's memory. I mean, there's even a touching tribute at the beginning of the game that says "In memory of Harold Ramis," because the script was written by Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd. So I'm kind of glad that it's still going. You know, even with the new movie coming out, Ghostbusters Afterlife, that is in a sense a continuation from Ghostbusters 2 and Ghostbusters the video game. Because, you know, if you've not seen the trailer, I do recommend you check it out. But basically, it's Egon's kids, Harold Ramis, and, you know, they essentially become the new Ghostbusters. You know, they revive the Ghostbusters after 30 years. As you know, and I can see that being a lot better than the female reboot that they did, because that one was just blasphemous. We should not even speak of that reboot, because they made a game based on that as well, and good God, that was terrible. They tried to make it all comic booky, you know, make it look like the real Ghostbusters animation, but they failed. It was it was. I hate to say this, but it was worse than the movie. You know, I would prefer to watch the movie than play that game again. So there's that. That's saying something. But the game itself is still very much enjoyable. You know, you can do so much in the game. There's so many collectibles. There's so many extras to find. And there's actually a fair few levels within the game, which is really awesome, you know, because if you remove the gameplay element and just watch the cutscenes back, it does feel like you are watching the third Ghostbusters movie. Because in a sense, you can watch the first Ghostbusters movie, you can watch the second Ghostbusters movie, and then you can just stop and wait for Afterlife, or you can play this. I mean, I recommend you play the PS3 version, because, yeah, there's nothing wrong with the PS3 version. Just, please, for the love of God, do not play the remastered version, or you will never want to touch this game again. But yeah, if you wanted to, you could watch the first two movies, you could play this game, and then you could watch Afterlife, and it would still feel like a continuation of the actual story, which is fantastic, you know? But the thing we want to know is, are they going to fix the game, or are they finished with it? Because the game's been out for a couple of months now, and like I said, they've only released 2 patches, and both those patches made the game completely unplayable. It made it completely worse. You know, the dialogue is basically, you can't hear a damn thing now. You can be stood right next to the character and you can't hear anything at all. The levels are completely broken now. You know, I get blue screened all the time. The game always crashes during the cutscenes. And not to mention, when you're actually playing the level, sometimes the ghosts that you're actually supposed to, you know, take down and catch aren't even in the place that you need to get them. You know, they're in an area that's inaccessible. So what's the point of it, you know? What's the point of it? But it's definitely worth a playthrough. Even though it's terrible, it is worth a playthrough. And I recommend you do check it out. I mean, like I said, I'd prefer that you check out the PS3 version, but I don't really know anybody who plays the PS3 anymore, so, you know. But now talking about the game, if you aren't familiar with it, the game follows the player's character as a new recruit in the Ghostbusters. And, you know, they catch and pursue ghosts, and you're being trained on the job, like an intern. The game features elements of a typical third-person shooter, but instead of using traditional guns, you are, of course, equipped with the Proton Pack. And the Proton Pack comes with a number of different features. You've got a freeze ray, you've got a kind of machine gun thing, and you've got slime. The slime is super duper fun, by the way. The game's plot is set 2 years after the events of Ghostbusters 2, so it's around Thanksgiving in 1991. Which, again, is really awesome because if you watch the trailer for Ghostbusters Afterlife, they actually say, or Paul Rudd's character actually says, nobody's seen a ghost in 30 years. And the timeline adds up from 1991 to 2019. The timeline adds up to that. And it's really cool that they're taking elements from the films and from the game and putting it into this new movie. But many of the principal cast members from the films were involved in the game's production. However, Bill Murray was incredibly difficult to work with, and he did leave mid-production. But, pretty much everybody returned. Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, Ernie Hudson, and even the secretary chick returned. I can't remember who she was. Annie Potts, that's it, Annie Potts. But even Vigo reprised his role. Max von Sydow. He reprised his role as the painting in the Ghostbusters headquarters. And, he has some small dialogue. He talks to the characters when you interact with the painting. So that's really cool, But Ghostbusters the video game, it also contains the soundtrack from the original Ghostbusters movie. And it features new locations that we've never seen before. It features locations that we have seen before, like the iconic Sedgwick Motel with Slimer. Basically, that level recreates the entire first movie. When I played through that first on the PS3, it was like a massive dose of deja vu. It was like, I'm just playing through the first movie here. This is epic. This is awesome. And they even talk about events from the movies in the game, which proves it is connected to the same universe, and it's not just separate and, this is happening before it all, or just happening differently, and none of the movies happened in the first place. You know what I'm talking about. You get what I'm saying there. But it is definitely worth a playthrough. I certainly still enjoy it to this day, and I would recommend it to anybody. I mean, okay, the remastered version really does need some work. It is buggy as hell. I mean, I could probably make a better game on my laptop computer, and that is saying something because even I'm not very good at programming and coding. But it's definitely worth a play, despite all its bugs and flaws. It's definitely worth a play. It's definitely worth a purchase. I mean, I think it's about 20 quid now, so so that's relatively cheap, and it's worth it. But if you do want the true experience, go get it on the PS3. Play it on the PS3 and enjoy the game without any bugs. I mean, seriously, you will have a hell of a time playing it. And like I said, you can skip the gameplay and just watch the cutscenes and enjoy it as a third movie, basically, because that's what it is when you remove the gameplay. I mean, well, actually, even with the gameplay added, it still feels like a third movie, which is fantastic. But I kind of strayed away from the whole thing I wanted to talk about in this video. I wanted to talk about why the remastered version bombed so hard, but we ended up talking about just both games in general. So before we go real quick, I am just going to put in my quick thoughts as to why I think Remastered bombed. So as I said earlier, I think it was because it was made by a different company and they just haven't put in the time and effort to make a remastered game. I think they've just ripped the original version and just put in the Unreal Engine for the graphics, and that's it. And because of that, it's the Unreal Engine that's ruined the game itself, because it can't handle it, because it's still a last generation game and the new graphics engine can't handle it, so there's a lot of bugs and glitches within the game. I also think it's because it's the wrong time for it. Yes, they released it just before Halloween, which was a great idea, but it's the wrong time for it. They should have released it maybe 2 or 3 months before Ghostbusters Afterlife came out, and it probably would have been received better. Because a lot of people I speak to didn't even know that this was a game in the first place. When I did my live stream of Ghostbusters Remastered, I remember someone coming in saying, "Remastered? There was a remastered version? There was a original version of this game in the first place?" I'm like, How could you not know this? It was epic. It was one of the best games I ever played on PS3. And, you know, that is saying something, considering PS3 did have a lot of great games. But anyway, guys, I think I'm going to call it there for this video, because I've just been ranting about shit. And, you know, it's one of those things where you could talk about it forever, because there's so much wrong with it, but there's also so much not wrong with it, you know, because it's just an interesting game to begin with. I would like to once again give all my subscribers a huge and mega shout out. Once again, thank you all so much for the continuous love and support of my content. I am currently taking requests, so if you guys head over to my community posts, you can drop me a line in that community post as to what you want to see from me in the future, and if it is within my power, I shall upload said request. And of course, with Christmas steadily approaching, I am going to be getting some new games, so we'll be playing those into the new year. Yeah, that's it then, guys. Thank you again so much for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. If you are new to the channel, don't hesitate to smash that like button and drop me a subscribe if you enjoy my content. All of my content of which is in a playlist for your convenience as well. So that being said, this has been Gamer Dude. Happy gaming, and I will catch you all in the next one, guys.